Muhammad Ali was driving through Miami's Overtown neighborhood at 11:43 p.m. on a humid August night in 1968 when he saw the red and blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror. He'd been at a community center earlier that evening, speaking to young black kids about staying in school, staying out of trouble, believing in themselves. Now he was heading home, tired but satisfied, listening to Sam Cooke on the radio. His Cadillac Eldorado, burgundy, pristine, top of the line, was his pride. He'd paid cash for it 6 months ago, right after winning back his boxing license. After 3.5 years of exile, of being stripped of his title for refusing the draft, Ali was finally allowed to fight again. And this car was his celebration, his symbol of everything he'd survived. Before we continue with the story, you can support us by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Don't forget to write in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. Let's continue. The police lights grew brighter in his mirror. Ali's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He knew this feeling, the sudden tension in his shoulders, the awareness spreading through his body, the instant calculation of every movement he was about to make. He'd felt it hundreds of times before. Every black man in America knew this feeling. He pulled over slowly, carefully, making sure to use his turn signal, making sure his hands were visible on the wheel. He rolled down his window and waited, the hot Miami night air mixing with the cold understanding that the next few minutes could go very wrong, very fast. The officer who approached his window was white, middle-aged, with a face weathered by too much sun and too much anger. His hand rested on his service revolver. His eyes swept over Ali with the kind of look that had nothing to do with law enforcement and everything to do with something older, darker, harder to name. "Boy," the officer said, and that single word carried generations of hate. "You know why I pulled you over?" Ali kept his hands on the steering wheel, kept his voice calm. "No, sir, I don't." "Boy, don't call me sir. That's for people who deserve respect." The officer leaned down, peering into the car. "License and registration." "Now, of course, officer. My license is in my wallet in my jacket pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now, slowly, so you can see my hands." I said, "Now, boy, you deaf or just stupid?" Ali reached for his wallet with movements so slow, so deliberate, they were almost theatrical. Because he knew, every black man knew, that reaching too fast, moving too sudden, could be the last thing you ever did. He handed over his license. The officer looked at it, and something changed in his expression. Recognition, then something worse, a kind of satisfied malice. "Well, well, well," the officer said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Cassius Clay, the draft dodger, the coward who wouldn't serve his country. My name is Muhammad Ali," Ali said quietly. "And I wasn't coward. I stood on principle. Shut your mouth, boy. I didn't ask you to speak." The officer straightened up, his hand still on his gun. "Step out of the vehicle." Now, what Muhammad Ali didn't know yet, what he couldn't know in that moment, was that this traffic stop would become one of the most important confrontations of his life. That his refusal to accept Boy as his name would spark a reckoning in the Miami Police Department. That the next 30 minutes would expose the ugliest parts of American policing and force a city to confront what its officers were doing in the dark. But in this moment, with red and blue lights painting the street and a cop's hand on a gun, Ali only knew he had to survive the next few seconds. And that survival meant being smarter, calmer, and more controlled than the man with the badge and the weapon. "I'm stepping out of the car," Ali said. "My hands are visible. I'm not reaching for anything. I'm cooperating fully." He opened the door slowly and stepped out onto the street. And across Overtown, in the houses and apartments lining the road, lights were beginning to turn on. Curtains were pulling back. People were watching. Because everyone in this neighborhood knew what red and blue lights at midnight meant. Everyone knew this could go bad fast. And everyone was about to witness what happened when power met principle, when authority met dignity. When a man with a badge called the heavyweight champion of the world Boy, and learned that some men refused to accept names they didn't choose for themselves. Officer James Crawford had been with the Miami Police Department for 19 years. He'd grown up in Georgia, where things were simpler, where everyone knew their place. He'd come to Miami in 1949, right after the war, expecting to find a city that understood order, that respected authority, that kept the natural divisions between people intact. But Miami had changed. The civil rights movement had infected everything. Black people were demanding equality, integration, respect. They were forgetting their place. And it made Crawford's job harder, made it more dangerous, made it more necessary than ever to remind people like this Cassius Clay, that badges and uniforms still meant something. Crawford circled Ali's car slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the night. Registration, he said. Ali opened the glove compartment carefully, retrieved the registration, handed it over. Crawford examined it, his lips moving as he read. "This your car, boy?" "Yes, sir. I purchased it." "I told you not to call me sir." Crawford's voice hardened. "And I asked you a question. Is this your car? Or did you steal it?" "It's my car. I have the title, the bill of sale, everything's legal." "Sure it is." Crawford's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Boy like you just happens to have a brand new Cadillac. Nothing suspicious about that." He looked at Ali with open contempt. "Turn around. Hands on the car. Spread your legs." Ali's jaw tightened. "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. You pulled me over, I don't even know for what reason. I've given you my license and registration. Everything's in order. There's no cause to search me. I determine what's cause, boy. And I said turn around." Around them, the neighborhood was waking up. More lights, more curtains pulling back, people stepping out onto porches. A crowd was beginning to form, 30, 40 people keeping their distance but watching. Everyone in Overtown knew James Crawford. Everyone knew his reputation. Everyone had a story. Ali turned around, placed his hands on the car, let Crawford pat him down with rough, aggressive movements designed to humiliate rather than search. The officer's hands were harsh, invasive, lingering in places that had nothing to do with officer safety and everything to do with asserting dominance. "You think you're special," Crawford said as he searched. "You think being on TV makes you better than you are? You're still just a boy. Still just another." He said the word, the one that had been hanging in the air since the moment he'd walked up to the car, the one everyone watching from their porches knew he'd been planning to say from the beginning. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted. A woman's voice. "You can't say that. That's Muhammad Ali." Crawford spun around, his hand going his gun. "All of you get back inside. This is police business. Anyone who interferes will be arrested." But the crowd didn't move. They stayed on their porches, on their front steps, bearing witness. Because in 1968, in Overtown, in neighborhoods like this across America, people had learned that witnesses mattered, that cameras would come eventually, that reports would be written, that the truth could be twisted, but witnesses remembered. Witnesses told the truth. Ali remained perfectly still, his hands on the car, his breathing controlled. He trained his whole life to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly when adrenaline was screaming at him, to react, to be smarter than his opponents. And right now, James Crawford was an opponent, one who held all the cards, all the power, all the authority, but still an opponent. "Officer," Ali said, his voice carrying to the crowd, "my name is Muhammad Ali." "It's not boy. It's not the name you just called me. It's Muhammad Ali, and I'd appreciate it if you'd use it." Crawford grabbed Ali's shoulder, spun him around. His face was inches from Ali's, red with anger. "I'll call you whatever I want, boy. You don't tell me what to do. You don't get to make demands. You're a draft dodger, a coward, a disgrace too. A 3-time heavyweight champion of the world." Ali interrupted, and his voice was still calm, still controlled, but it carried power now. "A man who stood up for his principles even when it cost me everything. A man who went to prison rather than compromise his beliefs. That's who I am, officer, and I deserve the basic respect of being called by my name." Crawford's hand moved to his nightstick. "You're resisting arrest." "I'm not resisting anything. I'm standing here with my hands visible, following your instructions, answering your questions. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't made any threats. I've done nothing but ask you to call me by my name. If that's resisting arrest in your eyes, then your eyes need examining." The crowd on the porches and sidewalks had grown to over 50 people now, And they weren't silent anymore. They were talking to each other, some calling out to Ollie, some recording what was happening in the notebooks they'd grabbed when they heard the commotion. This was 1968. People were learning to document, to create records, to make sure that when officers like Crawford wrote their reports, there would be other versions, true versions. An elderly man stepped forward from the crowd, slow, careful, hands visible. "Officer Crawford," he said, and his voice carried decades of living in this neighborhood, decades of dealing with police like Crawford. "That man, there is Muhammad Ali. He was at the community center tonight, talking to our kids. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He wasn't doing anything wrong. So why'd you pull him over?" "Back up, old man. This is none of your concern." "It's all our concern," a woman said. "We live here. We watch you patrol here. We see what you do." "What I do," Crawford said, his voice rising, "is keep this neighborhood safe. Keep people like him." He jabbed a finger at Ollie, from thinking they can do whatever they want, from thinking they're above the law. Above the law? Ali's voice was louder now, addressing the crowd as much as Crawford. "I was driving home, following every traffic law. I have a valid license, valid registration. I'm sober. I'm coherent. My car is in perfect working order. Officer Crawford pulled me over for no reason I can see except that I'm a black man in a nice car. And from the moment he approached my window, he's called me boy. He's insulted me. He's searched me without cause, and he's threatened to arrest me for the crime of asking to be called by my name." Ollie turned to face Crawford directly. "So let me ask you, officer, why did you pull me over? What traffic violation did I commit? What probable cause did you have?" Crawford's face was dark red now. His hand was shaking on his nightstick. Because the truth everyone standing there knew, was that he'd pulled Ollie over for driving while black, for being successful while black, for being in a nice car in a black neighborhood while black. And there was no legitimate reason he could articulate. "I don't have to explain myself to you," Crawford said. "Actually," said a new voice, "you do." Everyone turned. Walking up the street was another police officer, younger, black, his uniform crisp. His name tag read Johnson. He approached Crawford carefully, professionally. "Officer Crawford, I was 2 blocks away and heard the radio traffic. Everything okay here?" "Everything's fine, Johnson. I've got this under control." "I can see that." Johnson looked at Ollie, and something flickered in his expression, recognition, perhaps respect. "Mr. Ollie, are you okay? Has Officer Crawford informed you why you were pulled over?" "No, he hasn't, and he's been calling me boy for the past 15 minutes. Johnson's expression hardened. "Officer Crawford, did you inform the driver of the reason for the traffic stop?" "I don't need—" "Yes, you do. That's procedure. That's the law. You pull someone over, you inform them of the violation." Johnson pulled out a notebook. "So, I'm going to ask formally now, what was the traffic violation that prompted this stop?" Crawford looked around. At Ollie. At Johnson. At the 50-plus people watching from porches and sidewalks. At the growing realization that this wasn't going to end the way he'd planned. That he'd made a mistake. That he'd let his prejudice override his judgment. And now there were witnesses. A black officer who clearly wasn't going to back his play. And Muhammad Ali, the most famous black man in America, standing there calm and dignified while Crawford had been calling him boy. Crawford swallowed hard. His taillight was out. Johnson walked to the back of Ali's car. Both taillights were working perfectly. He came back. Both taillights are functional. "Want to try again?" Silence. Long, terrible silence. "Officer Crawford," Johnson said quietly, "I'm going to strongly suggest you return to your vehicle and complete your patrol. I'll handle this stop from here." "You can't." "Yes, I can. And unless you want me to file a report about this interaction, I suggest you do it now." Crawford looked at Ollie one last time, and in his eyes, there was something ugly. Not just anger or hatred, but the realization that the world was changing. That he couldn't do what he'd always done. That there were consequences now. Witnesses. Accountability. And it burned him up inside. He walked back to his patrol car without another word and drove away. Officer Johnson turned to Ollie. "Mr. Ollie, I apologize. That should never have happened. You were pulled over without cause, harassed, and subjected to behavior that violated department policy and basic human decency. Ollie took a deep breath, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. Thank you, officer. Can I ask your name? Marcus Johnson. I've been on the force for 3 years, and I've been dealing with officers like Crawford the whole time. The crowd on the porches started to approach now, seeing that the danger had passed. People wanted to shake Ali's hand, to thank him for staying calm, to share their own stories about Crawford. He pulled my son over last month, one woman said. Call him a thug. Search his car. Found nothing, but still gave him a ticket for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. He stopped me 5 times in 6 months, a young man added. Always at night. Always random checks. Always calling me boy, asking if the car was stolen. Johnson was writing in his notebook, taking names, recording statements. This is important, he said. I've been trying to document Crawford's pattern of behavior for 2 years. But I need witnesses. I need people willing to go on record. I'll go on record, Ollie said. What happened here tonight? That wasn't law enforcement. That was harassment. That was a man with a badge using it to assert his prejudices. It needs to stop. He looked at the crowd. How many of you have had experiences like this with Officer Crawford? Almost every hand went up. How many of you would be willing to tell your stories officially? To make formal complaints? The hand stayed up. Ollie turned back to Johnson. Then let's do it. Let's make sure this officer, and every officer like him, understands that this behavior isn't acceptable anymore. That we're not going to stay quiet. That we're not going to accept being called boy, or being harassed, or being treated like criminals just for existing while black. Johnson nodded slowly. It won't be easy. Crawford's been on the force for 19 years. He's got friends, allies, people who think like him. Filing complaints could make you all targets. I'm already a target, Ollie said. I've been a target since I refused a draft. Since I changed my name. Since I stood up for my beliefs. Being a target doesn't scare me. What scares me is staying silent. What scares me is letting officers like Crawford keep doing this to people who don't have my fame or my platform to fight back. An elderly woman from the crowd stepped forward. Young man, she said to Ollie, I've been living in this neighborhood for 42 years. I've seen a lot of things. I've been through a lot of things. And tonight, watching you stand up to that officer, watching you keep your calm and your dignity while he tried to break you, that was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. I didn't do anything special, Ollie said. Yes, you did. You showed these young people, she gestured to the teenagers in the crowd, that you don't have to accept disrespect, that you can stand up for yourself without violence, without escalation. That dignity is a choice, and you can choose it even when someone's trying to take it from you. The next morning, Muhammad Ali walked into the Miami Police Department headquarters with Officer Marcus Johnson and 17 residents of Overtown. They filed formal complaints against Officer James Crawford. Harassment, use of racial slurs, illegal search and seizure, abuse of authority, false traffic stop. The department tried to bury it, tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, as residents misinterpreting standard procedure. But Ali wouldn't let it go. He called a press conference. He told the story to every reporter who would listen. He described being called boy, being searched without cause, being threatened with arrest for asking to be called by his name. The story went national. Muhammad Ali harassed by police in traffic stop ran in newspapers across the country. Civil rights organizations demanded an investigation. The NAACP got involved. The Justice Department opened an inquiry into the Miami Police Department's patterns and practices. And then other victims started coming forward. Dozens of them. Black residents of Miami who'd been stopped by Crawford over the years. Who'd been harassed, threatened, searched without cause. A pattern so clear, so documented, that even the police department couldn't ignore it. Crawford was suspended pending investigation. The investigation revealed 19 years of complaints, most of them ignored or dismissed. It revealed that Crawford had been reprimanded multiple times for use of racial slurs, but never disciplined seriously. It revealed a culture within the department that protected officers like Crawford and punished officers like Johnson who try to hold them accountable. 6 months later, James Crawford resigned from the police force. He claimed it was voluntary, that he was ready to retire anyway. But everyone knew the truth. He'd been given a choice, resign or be fired. And even in resignation, He refused to admit wrongdoing, refused to acknowledge that what he'd done was wrong. But the real change wasn't Crawford leaving. It was what happened after. The Miami Police Department, under pressure from the Justice Department and civil rights organizations, implemented sweeping reforms. New training on implicit bias and de-escalation. A civilian review board to investigate complaints. Body cameras for all patrol officers. Promotion of black officers to leadership positions. Policies requiring officers to inform drivers of the reason for traffic stops. Changes that might never have happened if Muhammad Ali hadn't refused to accept being called boy. If he hadn't stayed calm when Crawford wanted him to escalate. If he hadn't used his platform to make sure the story was told. Years later, Marcus Johnson became the first black chief of the Miami Police Department. In his first interview after the promotion, he was asked what inspired him to stay in law enforcement despite the racism and resistance he'd faced. "I think about Muhammad Ali," Johnson said. "I think about that night in Overtown when Officer Crawford pulled him over, called him boy, tried to break his spirit. And I think about how Ali stayed calm. How he didn't give Crawford what he wanted, anger, violence, an excuse for escalation. How he turned that traffic stop into a teaching moment, a rallying moment, a moment that forced change. That's what good policing should be," Johnson continued. "Not about power and dominance and putting people in their place, but about serving communities, protecting dignity, treating every person, regardless of their race or status, with basic respect. Ali taught me that. He taught this whole department that." The community center in Overtown, where Ali had spoken the night of the traffic stop, was renamed the Muhammad Ali Community Center in 2016, shortly after Ali's death. At the dedication ceremony, the elderly woman who'd spoken to Ali that night, now in her 90s, gave a speech. "That night," she said, "Muhammad Ali could have gotten angry. He could have fought back. He could have given that officer exactly what he wanted, a reason to escalate, to arrest, maybe worse. But he didn't. He stood there with his hands on that car, and he said, 'My name is Muhammad Ali.' Not boy, Muhammad Ali. And in saying that, he wasn't just standing up for himself. He was standing up for every person who's ever been called a name they didn't choose. Every person who's been treated as less than human because of the color of their skin. That's what heroes do," she continued. "They turn moments of humiliation into moments of dignity. They transform personal injustice into collective action. They refuse to accept the world as it is and insist it become what it should be." The teenagers who'd watched that traffic stop from their porches, many of them now adults with children of their own, often tell the story to the next generation. They talk about the night Muhammad Ali came to their neighborhood, about the community center speech, about the traffic stop, about how he stayed calm while a cop tried to provoke him. And they end the story the same way every time. "He showed us that you don't need fists to fight. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand still, keep your dignity, and refuse to become what they say you are." Muhammad Ali fought many battles in his life, in the ring and out. But the battle on that Miami street in August 1968, standing next to a burgundy Cadillac with red and blue lights flashing, refusing to accept boy as his name, that might have been one of his most important, because he proved that courage isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes courage is staying calm, standing firm, refusing to escalate, turning a moment of injustice into a catalyst for change. That's what happened that night in Overtown. One traffic stop, one officer's prejudice, one man's dignity, and a community that witnessed it, documented it, and refused to let it be forgotten. Officer James Crawford is dead now. He died in 1994, never acknowledging what he'd done, never apologizing. But his name is remembered, not as the officer who served for 19 years, but as the man who called Muhammad Ali boy and learned that some names can never be forced on people who know who they are. And Muhammad Ali's name is remembered too, not just for the fights he won, but for the fights he chose, for standing on a dark street with his hands on a car, refusing to be anything less than himself. Refusing to accept disrespect, refusing to let fear or anger control his actions. That's what it means to be the greatest, not just in the ring, but in life, on streets lit by red and blue lights, in moments when dignity costs more than pride, in the choice to remain calm when the world wants you to rage. Muhammad Ali made that choice. And in making it, he changed not just his own life, but the lives of everyone who came after. Everyone who's been pulled over for driving while black. Everyone who's been called a name they didn't choose. Everyone who's had to decide, do I fight back, or do I stand firm? Ali showed them you could do both. You can stand firm and fight back. You just do it with words instead of fists, with dignity instead of anger, with the unshakable belief that your humanity isn't up for debate, isn't subject to someone else's prejudice, isn't diminished by a badge or a gun or a slur. That's the legacy of that August night in 1968. Not a fight won with punches, but a battle won with principle. And a reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to accept the names other people try to give you. My name is Muhammad Ali. Not boy, Muhammad Ali.